Well, I don't think I need to tell you that Kung Fu Panda is a masterpiece. Pretty much everyone agrees, for the most part. I haven't yet seen anyone who does disagree. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there who disagrees. I mean, there's always someone who disagrees with everything. But generally speaking, most people can agree that Kung Fu Panda is a masterpiece of a film. And it's not just for some specific reason, but kind of just the fact that everything about this movie is just masterfully made. It has some fantastic cinematography, an amazing art style, great music, an endearing and relatable story, and of course, many great characters, which is the prime subject of today's video, primarily the character of Tai Lung, but I also want to highlight some things about the Furious Five, Shifu, and Po, mostly because of the fact that Tai Lung's characterization heavily relies on how he contrasts with them, or is similar to them in some ways, or in the case of Shifu, just the fact that it's a very intimate master-student, father-son type relationship that, is broken. Anyway, let's actually get into that. Who is Tai Lung? I mean more so than just a character from Kung Fu Panda. Who is he really as a person? While we don't get a massive amount of details about his personality and his backstory, we still get more than enough to ground his perspective as a person. Now, I don't know if you saw the thumbnail of this video or anything. I mean, it's not like it's the main reason you probably clicked on it, but the word elitism might have been in there. And to me, Tai Lung is the epitome of an elitist character. There was nothing inherently special about Tai Lung when he was found as a baby, but he was trained by Shifu so carefully, so dedicatedly, and in many ways very lovingly. But he was always taught to be the best at everything because Shifu wanted him to be the Dragon Warrior. And while I'll get back to that and how it relates to Shifu, the problem here is that Tai Lung had basically been told his entire life that so long as he trained hard enough and did everything right, that he would be the best and no one would be able to say otherwise. And so that's exactly what Tai Lung thinks. He mastered Kung Fu to the very best of his abilities and learned almost every single move that Shifu learned, even moves that Shifu never taught the Furious Five later. But there's one thing that Tai Lung never learned that was crucially important, and the main deciding factor on why he was rejected as the Dragon Warrior, even though he was more than strong enough to take that part, physically speaking. And that's because he had no humility. Because he was always told he was the best, and that the determining factor in what makes you the best is being the most skilled at what you do. He didn't have any reason in his mind to think otherwise that he couldn't be the best, so he couldn't comprehend the idea that Oogway would ever say he's not worthy to be the Dragon Warrior. But it never even occurred to Tai Lung that being the Dragon Warrior isn't about who's the strongest, but rather who is the most fitting person to defend the people and protect what's right in their country. All Tai Lung could ever think about was himself and what he deserved, and not what was right for other people. And because of this, it actually made him not right for the position. And of course, to make things worse, he decided to throw a hissy fit temper tantrum and destroy a bunch of the village, probably a few people along the way, if you know what I mean. And this also shows us that not only does Tai Lung lack humility, but he lacks self-control, another massively important quality that the Dragon Warrior should have. And because he attacked the people of the village, it shows that he didn't care for them at all. Once again, only thinking of himself and what matters to him. Now, while all that's good and well, in terms of character writing, you may be wondering what the extra special ingredient that makes Tai Lung stand out so much is, since, there's lots of other villains who have similar traits to what I've already described. And I think that extra special sauce specifically comes in two forms. And the first of those two special forms is, of course, his actual kung fu moves as we see them on screen. Tai Lung is an incredibly entertaining character to watch. Basically every single scene with him is an action scene. And not just any action scene, but arguably one of the greatest action scenes in cinematic history. This cat has 4 fight scenes. Well, the first one's more of an escape scene than a fight scene, but still, all 4 of them would be contenders for some of the best fight scenes in cinematic history. Like, that's how epic these scenes are. So, like, a ton of credit to the animators for going above and beyond in making some of the most entertaining sequences I have ever seen in any movie. Like, I mean, it is really difficult to describe in words what makes these fight scenes work so well. But, like, just picking a specific example, I really love the escape sequence, especially in how it showcases that the very thing that would later cause Tai Lung's downfall, as well as the reason why the Furious Five would fail to stop him along the way, is the same thing that causes the guards to fail at their job of keeping Tai Lung imprisoned. Pride. They're so confident in their ability to keep him imprisoned that they don't even consider the idea that something could go wrong. They think that all they need is a bunch of tough guys and some strong weaponry. But the problem is they're dealing with someone who's not just powerful, but clever as well. And Tai Lung is incredibly patient. That's like one of the few virtues he actually has down, I'll admit. And he waits for the exact moment when something as simple as a feather blows down to him. And with sleek maneuverability, he uses that simple feather to completely undo the entire prison. And this sequence is also really good because it's the first time we actually see Tai Lung in action. And he utterly destroys the prison. Like, literally speaking. The prison isn't even there by the time he's done. Just a collapsed cave-in. And I don't know if you noticed, but he either buried most of the guards or sent them flying off a cliff at the end. As far as we know, the messenger duck is the only survivor. Now, if that isn't how you establish the threat level of a villain right from the start, then I don't know what is. And the second secret sauce that makes Tai Lung into one of the greatest villains in cinematic history is the way he interacts with the other characters. Because not only do his interactions bring out the most in those other characters, but they also make Tai Lung into a more interesting character by contrasting with him. Let me explain. And I'll start with the Furious Five, who actually suffer from a similar problem to Tai Lung when it comes to pride and elitism. You see, the way this movie frames it is that the Furious Five all generally grew up in a similar circumstance, being told that they would be great at kung fu, and that with enough training they would become masters, potentially even worthy of being the Dragon Warrior. After all, pretty much all of them are baffled when Po is picked. And they generally seem to think that he's not worthy of it. Even when you take into account additional sources like the Secrets of the Furious Five short, this still 100% applies to Mantis, Viper, and Tigress. Crane less so though, since it's shown that he came from a more simple, lower class life originally. But interestingly enough, Crane is probably the least harsh to Po in this movie out of all the Furious Five, so it actually kind of does match. Like, for example, with Crane, we can see that when he tells Po that he doesn't belong here, he was just referring to his room.
Look, you don't belong here.
My whole life, I've dreamed of...
No, I meant you don't belong here. I mean, in this room. But this is my room.
Whereas when Tigress says the same statement, she meant like in Kung Fu in general, and that he should just go back to his old life.
Master Tigress, didn't mean to wake you, just,
You don't belong here.
Yeah, of course. This is your room.
I mean, you don't belong in the Jade Palace.
Pretty big difference. So both of those things actually do match up pretty well still. And we're really not given that much information from Monkey's backstory to say, one way or another, what his history was really like. And quite frankly, he doesn't really make that many comments in this movie in general. He's just kind of the least vocal about his opinions. Anyway, the point is, the Furious Five also have a bit of this elitism issue going on, which is very evident in the way that they treat Po. The problems that the Furious Five have, though, are slightly less so than Tai Lung's issue, mostly because of the fact that it's spread out between the five of them. Since Shifu was so disappointed the first time when he trained Tai Lung, he decided to train 5 individuals instead to increase his odds of finding the Dragon Warrior, while also not being as devastated if none of them get picked since he didn't put as much effort into each one. But he did still kind of teach them to act like they were better than everyone else. At least, he was pretty effective in doing so with Tigress. The one thing he did succeed at, though, was actually making sure they worked as a team, which is actually a very good reason for Oogway not picking any of them as a Dragon Warrior, if you think about it, since they work better as a team, and if one of them was the Dragon Warrior, then they might let it go to their head and think that they have to be the leader and do all this other stuff, and act out on their own instead of just working together as a team. Whereas by, picking Po instead, that picks a completely different individual who was never taught to work with them as a team in the same way that they were. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, Tai Lung. So basically, the Furious Five think that they can stand up to Tai Lung because they've had so much training just like him. And there's 5 of them versus 1. I mean, how could they fail? They fail. You see, the primary issue is that, 1, they're too prideful and overconfident in their abilities to succeed, and thus, Tai Lung actually has to humble them and teach them a lesson. When the villains always brag about teaching the hero a lesson, ironically, if Tai Lung had said something like that here at this moment, he would have been right. But secondly, they're not thinking about the fact that Shifu put all his energy into teaching Tai Lung, and he taught Tai Lung stuff that he never taught any of the 5 of them. So even though there are 5 of them, Tai Lung has about equal knowledge to all 5 of them combined, plus more experience because he's been doing it for longer. And there's also a third reason why they fail, but it has more to do with Po, so I'll mention it when I get to him. But basically, point is, the Furious Five were never going to succeed no matter how skilled they were. This just wasn't their fight. They were woefully underprepared even though they thought otherwise. And eventually, Tai Lung makes it to Shifu, his old master, for yet another brilliant fight scene. But the main point isn't the fight itself, even though it is pretty epic. The main point is, of course, to show us how much Shifu has grown as a character here, and how much Tai Lung refuses to grow. Because after Tai Lung beats Shifu here, Shifu basically admits exactly what he did wrong.
I have always been proud of you. From the first moment, I've been proud of you. And it was my pride that blinded me. I loved you too much to see what you were becoming. What I was turning you into. I'm sorry.
And it's like, for a moment, Tai Lung gets it. You could see on his face, he understands what Shifu says, but it so fundamentally goes against what he's believed all these years that he just can't accept it and throws it away. And you can see that moment right here when his expression changes. And he deliberately chooses not to grow as a person and change his ways. Not because he doesn't know better, but because he doesn't want to know better. He wants to keep living the delusion that he's the greatest person ever, and that no one could ever possibly be on his level. And thus he is deserving of all the accolades and titles and everything, and no one should even try to challenge him. Unfortunately for him, someone challenges him. Enter Po. Now you see, Tai Lung has absolutely no idea what to expect when he sees Po, because Po is so fundamentally different from everything that he's been taught or has taught himself to believe is true about people and the world itself. He literally cannot believe that anyone like Po could ever possibly be good at anything, not to mention good enough to challenge him or defeat him. He's not the right type of person. He comes from the wrong place in society. He just looks so fundamentally like a loser that Tai Lung prejudges him on everything, and that is a fatal mistake. For Po's entire life, he's been living something that he's not interested in. The place in society that he was born into is below the level of what he's interested in doing. He wants to do kung fu, but he's just a lowly noodle cook. And that's what society thinks he should be. They look at him, they see where he comes from, what he looks like, and they say, this is your place in society, deal with it. But it's just utterly depressing to Po to live a life like this that he so fundamentally does not enjoy whatsoever. That he would literally rather be in kung fu and be beat up and insulted by all the kung fu masters while trying to train with them than he would not being there at all.
You knew I was trying to get rid of you, yet you stayed.
Yeah, I stayed. I stayed because every time you threw a brick at my head or said I smelled, it hurt. But it could never hurt more than it did every day of my life just being me.
And it's not because he was bad at what he did before. It's just that he's not interested in doing it. It's not his personality. And I can seriously relate to this. You know, as being someone not exactly born into a wealthy family, and even though I haven't exactly had the same opportunity as Po gets in this movie, you know, just for example, say, you know, becoming a YouTuber, there's so much competition on YouTube and people who are just able to cheat the system because they've already got so much money that they can pay for editors and other stuff that I just can't, that it feels like everything is against you and people will just say, oh, you're just not meant for this. But you know that, like, anything else that you do in life would just not be the same level of satisfaction. And it's just not what I was meant for, if you know what I'm trying to say. I don't know. Anyway, point is, I relate to Po. Oh, and another factor, too, is just his personality in general, too. It's not just where he comes from or what he looks like, but, like, how he acts. Like, it doesn't look like he takes Kung Fu or really anything seriously. But the thing is, that's just his sillier personality speaking. It's not that he doesn't take it seriously. He takes it very seriously. I mean, he was trying very hard, like, the entire movie, basically, to try and actually learn Kung Fu. It's just so far outside what he's experienced that it's hard for him to get used to such a different environment. I mean, if he wasn't taking things seriously from the start, then, I mean, how did he learn the wuxi finger hold when the only time it was ever done to him was, like, literally the first thing Shifu did when he was first talking to him?
Listen, Oogway said that I was the... the wuxi finger hold? Not the wuxi finger hold.
Yet he learned it immediately. It's the first Kung Fu skill he ever learned just by paying attention to what Shifu was doing because that's how much he actually did care. And it's really sad when you see, like, this scene where Tigress is, you know, telling him that he doesn't belong here. And she says all this stuff like,
You're a disgrace to Kung Fu, and if you have any respect for who we are and what we do, you will be gone by morning.
Like, I mean, that's pretty tragic. Like, Po clearly cares, as we've established, and yet she's telling him that his very existence there is an insult to the very art form of Kung Fu. And this is just pure emotional manipulation on Tigress's part, let's be clear. Because she's trying to manipulate him into believing that if he even so much as tries to fit in, that he's actually insulting everyone else and thus the very thing he loves. And so he should just quit if he really loves it. I mean, that's just downright mean. But thankfully she does learn her lesson by the end of the movie, unlike a certain someone. Speaking of, this is when we get to Po versus Tai Lung. And you see, even though Tai Lung completely underestimates Po in every possible way, that's not just the main reason he fails. You see, Tai Lung was actually doomed to fail this fight right from the start. As soon as Po learned anything about Kung Fu, it was over for Tai Lung. This is why he had to be the Dragon Warrior and why he had to be the one to defeat Tai Lung. Because the way in which Po was trained, the way in which he learned his style of Kung Fu is a direct foil to Tai Lung in this situation, because Tai Lung is so utterly focused on getting the Dragon Warrior scroll. So long as Po keeps it out of his hand, it becomes a mission for who can get to the scroll first. And the very thing that motivates Po is getting something he wants. And by putting something he wants in front of him, he will stop at nothing to get that thing. Whereas Tai Lung was simply taught how to be a good fighter, not how to achieve a goal in the same way that Po learned. His instinct to succeed in his mission of keeping the scroll away from Tai Lung and getting to it first every time it gets knocked away is utterly unstoppable, and Tai Lung can't deal with that because it's not his fighting style. And this is really interesting too, because part of the reason why Shifu was going to reject Po at first was because he thought he was unteachable, because he was so used to teaching people Kung Fu in that specific way, which just focuses entirely on, you know, form and fighting style, that he didn't think about how you could teach people how to be good at something in different ways. Now, this is something I extremely relate to, even more than the other stuff with Po, in the sense that I have ADHD, which, by the way, on the exact day, funnily enough, that I'm recording this, I was officially diagnosed with ADHD, so it's not even like my own personal theory anymore. And as someone with ADHD, I can confirm that people with ADHD are not bad at learning things. We just learn things differently from other people. And you have to adapt to that kind of way that different people think differently about different things. And it doesn't mean that they're bad at something just because you want them to learn it in a specific way. It just means you have to change the way that you teach them.
I cannot train you the way I have trained the five. I now see that the way to get through to you is with this.
And this is really, really interesting, you see, because Tai Lung thinks that he's the greatest kung fu fighter of all time, and he's the master of all kung fu skills that were taught to him. But the thing is, he only learned how to use those skills in one very specific way. Now, think about it like kind of like how in Star Wars there's different kind of fighting styles that the Jedi Masters use. Tai Lung is like a master of a single style of lightsaber fighting, so to speak, but he doesn't know any of the other styles. And the style that Po happens to know directly counters all his abilities. And he just can't even comprehend that because he thinks his way of thinking of things and his way of doing things is the only right way to do things and the best way, which is exactly the fatal flaw of elitism. It's when you think that your way of doing things is the best and your way of seeing things is the best and no other way could possibly be correct. And so when you see people who don't fit in with your worldview, you just say they can't possibly be good enough and they're just not fit to even be part of what you're doing. But sadly, all of that is Tai Lung's undoing. Well, that and also the fact that Po is literally immune to his overpowered immobilization ability due to his thickness, which I suppose is also a contributing factor to the reason that Tai Lung was doomed from the start. And it's interesting to note that the main theme of this movie is about how there isn't a special ingredient that makes anyone special.
There is no secret ingredient.
Just because Tai Lung was trained by Shifu doesn't make him special, it's who he chooses to be and his actions that would. And as we've seen by how he attacks innocent people and rejected Shifu's apology, we know that he has in fact chosen the path of self-delusion. Po, on the other hand, simply followed his passion with admiration and respect, and never tried to use the fact that he was chosen as Dragon Warrior to his advantage, but rather he chose to simply go on being himself and only considering his role when he had to take it seriously for the sakes of everyone else. No one is made special by labels, and there is not one right way to do things. Different people are skilled in different ways. We don't need to pretend to be the best at everything when we were never made to be the best at everything, only the best at some things, or even just the second or third best. But that doesn't mean we're less valuable in those cases than those who are more skilled in some ways. Tai Lung believes that you have to be the best at everything to be special, to his detriment, in that if he isn't the bestest ever, then he is less valuable, and it has literally driven him mad. Oh, and another detail I love about Tai Lung's defeat here, after he does briefly get his hands on the scroll, and finds out that there's, nothing on it, just some reflective material to look at yourself, he just doesn't get it, and the point goes completely over his head, even when Po tries to explain it to him. He was so obsessed with the idea that this scroll would make you the best person ever, and it would give you this great power and prove that you're the strongest fighter who ever existed, that finding out that there's nothing on it destroys his entire motivation. And his final pathetic attempts to beat Po at the end fail miserably because he's literally lost all motivation to win anyway. Oh, and can I just mention how utterly poetic it is that not only is Tai Lung this ultra elitist person defeated by the most ordinary, normal person who didn't even know anything about any kung fu moves, a few weeks, a couple months at most ago when this movie started, but also the fact that he loses to the very first move Po learned, which also just so happens to be the only move, as far as we know, that Shifu never taught him. The Wuxi finger hold. Absolutely poetic.
The Wuxi finger hold?
Oh, you know this hold.
You're bluffing. You're bluffing! Shifu didn't teach you that.
Nope. I figured it out. Skadoosh.
And the funniest thing too, of course, is that Shifu didn't even teach Po. He just figured it out because he cared so much about Kung Fu and how it was used as an art form. He just simply paid attention to how Shifu was doing it in order to do it himself. Once again, a difference in learning style, since Tai Lung pretty much probably assumed that the only way you could learn something is by having someone tell you what to do, then practicing it over and over again until you get it right. But since Shifu never actually told him how to do it, he never tried and never practiced it and never learned it. But Po, by simply using a different method of learning something, learned it instantly before he learned any other move. and it was vital in ultimately defeating Tai Lung here at the end. And as far as we know, there's no other person who knows this ability, other than Shifu, obviously. Which means, once again, no one else but Po could have been the one to defeat Tai Lung. So, as you can see, my friends, Oogway is obviously correct when he says,
There are no accidents.
and I suppose to round things off, we'll conclude with the lesson of the day and what we can learn from Tai Lung. Now, obviously, don't be an elitist. I think that should be pretty obvious. Don't just exclude people because you think you know best or you're better at things than them. And try to teach them how to be better at things. Because the more people are better at things, the better. Because when only one person is really good at something, it goes to their head. And we also need to remember that different people learn things differently from each other. So even if you try to teach someone something and they're not getting it, try to find a different way to explain to them or teach them. And lastly, but arguably most importantly, the direct counter to pride and elitism as a whole, humility. AKA not thinking too highly of yourself, especially when it comes to the exclusion of other people. Now, I don't know if you've heard this one before, but it's pretty much a perfect example of Tai Lung versus Po in this movie. There's a story where Jesus is confronting the Pharisees, something he did quite frequently, and he tells them that it's better to take the lowly seat and be asked to go up to a higher position than to take the highest seat and be shamefully sent down to the lowest seat. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And with all that, I of course have to give a massive thank you to all the patrons and channel members who help to support me in an extra special way.
And an extra big shout out to that one Sleep No More fan. Excellent Doctor Who reference, by the way.
Well, if you enjoyed this video, I hope that maybe you would stick around and watch a few more of my videos. If you haven't seen them, I've got a playlist of DreamWorks related videos up here. There's not too many at the time of making this video, but I do plan on making more in the future, so who knows, maybe if you're watching this future, there's tons of videos in that playlist. Or of course you could go with another villain analysis video, which I've got a whole playlist of those over here. Either way, I hope you enjoy more of my content, but most importantly of all, always remember to be iconic.